have a dream.
America, 50 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s iconic speech. His message still inspiring.
And because of him, I decided to go to college.
Great strides have been made through the years. The Civil Rights Act, Equal Employment Act, the Voting Rights Act, legal moves to make the American dream accessible to everyone. And in 2008, a historic moment for the country.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
America's first African-American president. But racial tension never far from the surface, as witnessed just 2 months ago. A single event capable of dividing a nation again.
State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict, we the jury find George Zimmerman not guilty.
We are demonstrating that the justice system has failed once again.
Race in America, how far we've come and how far we have left to go. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jennifer Gilbert. The issue of race in America, it is a highly charged and emotional issue. It is very complex, and especially given America's ugly past. We each bring the experiences of our past to this discussion and our own biases regardless of race. But how do we move forward? That will be discussed tonight. We have a packed studio audience tonight and a panel of 4 people, which we'll go to in just a minute. But first, we want you to join this discussion. You can post your comments and questions for our panelists by going to our Facebook page, facebook.com/FoxBaltimore, or through Twitter. And we're using the hashtag tonight, Your Voice, Your Future. I'm going to be monitoring the comments and passing them on to our moderator, Mark Hyman. And with that, I'll turn things over to Mark, who is in Studio B with our Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall. Mark.
Thanks, Jen. Welcome to Studio B. I'm Mark Hyman, host of Behind the Headlines and the moderator of the Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall series. You heard it. Tonight's topic is race in America. Race. We're conscious about it every single day. Tonight, we discuss it. Now, you heard Jen mention just a moment ago, we have a packed studio audience who's anxious to get started. They have a lot of questions they want to put to our panel of experts. So let's go ahead and meet them right now. Joining us this evening is Aisha Braveboy. She's a Maryland delegate from the 25th District representing Prince George's County. She's chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, and she's a candidate for Maryland Attorney General. C.D. Witherspoon, he's a pastor, and he's president of the Baltimore chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Emmett Burns, he's a pastor, and he's a Maryland delegate representing the 10th District in Baltimore County. And Charles Lawler, he's a Maryland businessman, and he's a candidate for Maryland governor. Additional information on our panelists and their organizations can be found on our website, foxbaltimore.com. I'd like to emphasize panelists are here in their personal capacities. The views they represent are their own unless they state otherwise. Now, you heard we have a packed audience here. I told you how to reach us from home. And we want to hear from you at home because a question we ask on air might be yours. So please participate on social media with Facebook and Twitter. We want to hear from you. Now, we're going to start the evening off, as we do in a town hall, by asking questions. But our first question isn't going to go to our panel. It's going to go to the studio audience. And I'd like you to respond by the sound of applause. Your choices and answers are yes and no. I'd like you to respond to this statement, whether you agree with it or not. The statement: there will be a day when America has a colorblind or near colorblind society. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Those who believe no, please applaud. It appears to be 50-50. I'm going to put the same question to our panel members by a show of hands. Will we one day have a colorblind or certainly near colorblind society? Those who believe yes, please raise your hand. Those who believe no.
I think we need to qualify it. And I'm not sure that having a colorblind society should be a goal or a realistic goal. I think having a society that appreciates individuals regardless of their color or their gender is really the most important thing, because we are all of different races and ethnicities, but we all live here in this country. And so we're all citizens and residents of the United States of America. And as citizens and residents, We all have certain responsibilities and also certain rights that need to be respected at every level. So regardless of whether or not someone acknowledges that someone is black or white or Hispanic or Asian or man or woman, the real question is, what stereotype are you attributing to that person based on their gender or their color?
Thank you. We're going to go to our first studio audience member question of the evening. Please tell us who you are, where you're from, and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Calvin. I'm a local business owner, and I have 2 sons, and it comes to me all the time about race relations. And what I believe is, you made a perfect segue to my question. I believe this country has always been racist. It started out it was racist against different ethnicities that came here, different religions, but it seems like every race and culture have been able to overcome racism, but the problem is they join in on that racism, and it all comes down to African Americans when they're racist against us. And I find so often that people that have of your skin color, your tone, your hue, oftentimes, we see someone like myself. This guy could be from Russia, he could be Irish, different races, but what happens is it always comes back to African Americans are always treated the worst when it comes to race relations. I think that maybe you guys have some answers, have some input. Why is that always the issue?
CD, what do you think?
Quite frankly, I believe that a lot of it has to do with the African American response to this particular crisis. When you look at the American Civil Rights Movement, it was the greatest movement that ever took place in the history of the world. It created inroads for minority groups and movements and struggles around the world. And I think that the reason why that transpired was because we had the innate ability to dig down deep on the inside of us and pull on that fortitude and that courage that we've had since the beginning of time, and that is essentially to fight back and to create creative solutions to these types of issues that have been hindering this country since the very beginning. The foundation of this country, regretfully, was built on slave labor, quite frankly, and also when you look back in terms of the indigenous Native Americans, how this country was taken from them and colonized. The important aspect is that we are here today. We have children that we have to create a better and brighter future for. And so we've got to create creative solutions to these types of issues. We've got to confront the issue head on. One thing that we can't do is work behind the scenes. A lot of us like to do that. We've got to be upfront and personal with this stuff, and we've got to take on this issue of racism and discrimination head on, this issue of economic discrimination, the issue of the overrepresentation of African American males in the criminal justice system, the issue of poverty and austerity. These are issues that we have to confront government accountability and government's role in the repression and the suppression of people.
Charles, you agree?
Well, I tell you what, I like the way Delegate Brayboy started the conversation because it speaks to the heart of the matter. How do you define a colorblind society? And I think that's important. I go back to Martin King's definition. In fact, even when he gave his remarks in D.C., that he had a dream that one day his children would not be judged by their color, by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And if we don't hold on to that dream in terms of its intent, I think every day you wake up, we all have eyes. We all have our senses. You're going to be able to see what somebody looks like and know that they differ from how you look. But the intent of the statement was that we would all be given a fair opportunity, although we know results sometimes won't be fair. You can't guarantee fair results. My hope is that if my daughter outworks your daughter, that my daughter gets a better result than yours, Mark. No racism intended. So you can't guarantee fair results, but what you can guarantee, what we should be able to work toward, is fairness of opportunity. So understanding the intent should provoke everyone in this room to raise their hands. Absolutely, one day, from the principle and the intentions, we want everyone to be seen from a fair opportunity perspective. Will that happen sooner than later? My hope is that it will. Do I believe it will in my lifetime? I don't know, but I certainly hope so in my grandson or my great-grandchildren's lifetime. But that has got to be something that we aspire to. Now, when you bring the government into the mix, I hear what the pastor's saying. I'm not as quick to blame the government. That might even sound a little bit funny with me running for governor against the O'Malley administration, but I believe in self-government and self-opportunity the same way Dr. King did. I think that we all have an opportunity to make the right decisions. If we make the wrong decisions, we can expect not so favorable outcomes. But the onus is on us. I tell my daughters all the time, the same way my mother and father told me, son, your responsibility is to do the right thing. I remember the first day I came home from Christian school and I tried to blame my teachers for the paddling I got, and I tried to say I'm the only black kid in the class. My dad said, then I'm going to give you a spanking too. That was my father's response to it, because he understood something simple. It's not who you blame, because you empower people you blame. It's what you're willing to do as a result of the set of circumstances that are in front of you. So what we got to do is we got to position our family members, our friends. We got to position people to see, you know what, there's an opportunity for us to prescribe to this dream. Will we make it here? Dr. King certainly didn't see the first African-American president in this country, but we do have one. And I think we're going to see even larger and bigger benchmarks along the way. But don't throw away the dream just because we have a few idiots that we run into along the way.
And we're back to the audience. Please tell us who you are, where you're from, and ask your question.
My name is Brother Bay. I'm the founder of Foxhole. Foxhole is an acronym for the Fraternal Order of Ex-Offenders. Okay? My question is, if you're going to change the fruit, you got to deal with the root. America's a capitalistic society, and the DNA chromosome of the capitalism of America is racism, capitalism, elitism, and all those other dynamics. Now, I'm not going to give an opinion. Let's go to the law. We just had a 50-year celebration versus elevation of Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1963 Civil Rights Act, 1964 Voting Rights Act, 1965 Fair Housing Act. Let's forget the rhetoric. How many people, whether they're eligible or not, today, civil rights are being violated? Now, I do research, and I'm not going to hold you hostage, but this is a reality. The policing of the black ghetto exemplifies the contradiction in America between the theory and ideology of equal justice for us all, and the reality of the middle class, upper class ability to protect themselves from being closely scrutinized by police. In the state of Maryland, with 28% of the population, more than 70% of the population is apprehended and adjudicated for drugs or drugs-related offenses, but yet we more nearly 95% of those who are incarcerated.
And your question is?
And my question is, when will we move beyond the rhetoric and deal with the reality and be more inclusive about the disparities and the so-called parities in this society? Closing, no pun intended. Police Commissioner Bates looked like me, but he responded to a call in Roland Park and apologized for the dispatcher being 20 minutes late getting there. When have you heard someone in his position have the backbone to change our condition and show equality for the same misjustice that's happening in the African-American community?
Thank you for the question. Well, Emmett, what do you think?
Well, I don't know what his question was. I want to respond to.
When we move from rhetoric to make a reality.
I don't want to respond to that. I want to respond to the first question where we have colorblind society. Absolutely not. And I say absolutely not because race is so endemic, so a part of the mainstream of this nation until we will never have a colorblind society. We have a commission in the legislature on the history and legacy of slavery. The legacy is our problem. In too many instances, the policies of government, both federal and state, perpetuate a legacy of the now. And the way we speak, where we live, how we work, how much education we have, those legacies that remain with us are not being addressed. The fact that Obama is elected president of the United States does not signal a colorblind society. It signals it signals the power of politics, which is a different game, and I'll have more to say about that later.
I want to bring Aisha into this.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Brother Bay's question, and I think you actually hit the nail on the head and asked, I think, the most relevant and right question that we've heard so far. I'm sure there'll be some other great questions as well, but when you look at issues that are currently present in our society, and let's just take, for instance, you mentioned housing, right? You know, we had this, the bailout of the banks, and the banks, and then we had the mortgage settlement agreement, and the agreement with the 5 largest institutions that led to the crisis were supposed to, in fact, relieve many of the homeowners who were either foreclosed upon or those who were facing foreclosure. But when you look at the practices of the banks, and you look at those properties that the banks own, which are called REO properties, many of those properties that are in minority communities, African American communities, low-income communities, stay on the market, some of them for well over a year, while properties in higher income communities stay on the market maybe for a month or so. What does that do to the overall economics in that particular area? Well, whether or not I lost my home due to foreclosure, I'm impacted by the market. And if a home is staying on the market for like a year, it's dragging down the value of everyone's property in that zip code. And what does that do to everyone else? What it does is it reduces the wealth of that community, because for most people, their wealth is in their real estate, in their homes. And if you're not giving them an opportunity to recoup some of their losses or to continue to try to grow the value of their homes by moving the properties quickly, then some of those communities that are economically depressed now will continue to be economically depressed. And it disproportionately affects minority communities. And so one of the reasons, and I don't want to make this a campaign speech because I'm here as in my individual capacity, but I think it is extremely important that the Office of the Attorney General, whether it's now or in the future, really addresses the issue of banks targeting low-income communities and not moving properties in those communities, because that erodes the wealth base. And most people, you know, nowadays we don't do it as much, but it used to be 10, 15 years ago, most families were able to take out loans against the value of their home in order to send their children to school, okay? And that helps that next generation reach a new economic level. So if we prevent families from being able to really realize the value of their homes, we're preventing not just that generation, but the next generation from being successful. So you're absolutely right. We do need to look at policies. We do need to look at the current day practices and how they impact economically, especially economically, the minority community.
I want to stay with this theme for just a moment, and then afterwards we're going to have to find out what our viewers at home think, because I think they are absolutely part of this debate. Before we go to the social media desk, I want to follow up with what this gentleman mentioned. He made a general statement that capitalism, part of that is racism. Aisha just addressed some of the issues, the economic side of the equation. Charles, what do you think?
You know, my concern is, let me first start by saying that I couldn't be in any more agreement with what Delegate Brayboy is saying. To this one fact, that yes, in many of our communities, urban and otherwise, they struggle. We struggle in terms of resale, wholesale, the value in getting the necessary dollars generated to help a further generation. I've even had folks that have worked with me that have actually, and one gentleman's in this room, and I'm going to remain nameless just for his purpose, but he's actually talked about taking his business and reinvesting in many of the urban centers in Baltimore City to rebuild those homes, to give people the opportunity, because when going through the Bless Baltimore movement, he was just shocked by just how many homes, the way they look, the close down opportunities, it just doesn't give and present an extensive opportunity for us going forward. But here's my concern. With all of that, I want to say this. Who we empower for our future is very important. Who we hand over blame to or submit the reins to say it's their fault, we constantly take power away from us. As a business owner, I know you understand that. We have enough influence in this country where if we wanted to, and I'm talking about all Americans, not just diverse Americans, but when you talk about race relations, it's more than just black Americans. But we have enough freedom and opportunity in this country where if we wanted to, we could change our own conditions. The problem is we're getting caught up in the same political runaround that has been served to us for years. I'll give you a great example. This whole gerrymandering issue that happened here in the state of Maryland. And Mark, I want to be very specific when I say this. Gerrymandering, according to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, was only created so that the diverse population would have equal representation when it comes to those that represent them, whether in Congress or U.S. Senate. However, we just saw in this state a gerrymandering activity that took place that had nothing to do with giving the diverse population more votes. In fact, all it did was give the Democratic Party more votes. Now, my concern was, where was the backlash? Where was the backlash amongst elected officials that were diverse in this state that should have stood up and said, this gerrymandering has nothing to do with the 1964 Act. You're just trying to make sure you have enough Democrats. And then, oh, by the way, you bypassed Prince George's County that had an opportunity to put another representative in the so-called 5th Congressional District. And then when one legislator tried, she was silenced and almost ended up going to jail behind some things behind closed doors that no one wants to talk about. We can do something about our condition, but if we get caught up in the same political runaround, regardless of party affiliation, we're going to fall victim, and all we're going to do is keep the rhetoric and keep blaming somebody else instead of empowering ourselves to make a difference.
I think this whole conversation is going the wrong way. We are here to talk about Black America, where we have come, how far we have come, and where we need to go. Not who's elected to what, not gerrymandering. What do blacks, let me finish. What do blacks, yes, blacks. What do blacks?
It doesn't say black and white in America.
Well, tell Zimmerman that. Tell Zimmerman that. What do blacks need to do to get our act together? We cannot get everybody else's act together until we get ours together.
You haven't closed-minded right there. That's why you raised your hand and said...
We're going the wrong way. We're going the wrong way. Never will be.
Gentlemen,
never will be.
Bottom line, you're closed-minded.
Never will be.
Let's stop this right here.
Because you're closed-minded.
Never will be.
And people like you will be the reason this country
like you are well-meaning, and that's the end of it.
Actually, this is a great time because you see there's passion in this room, and we've got passion at home as well. So I want to go to our social media desk because a lot of folks at home want to be a part of this debate. So Jen, what do you have for us?
Well, you're right, Mark. A lot of opinions on this, both sides of this very sensitive issue tonight, and a lot of passion on social media. Here's our question of the day. Have race relations improved in the U.S. during the past 50 years? And again, we're using the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture tonight. Vincent says, why can't we just be the human race? The color of our skin should not matter. 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers, and 10 toes. Randy says, yes, they have improved up until Barack Obama took office. Now the racists are as loud as ever. Now this is a theme we're seeing from people both black and white on social media, feeling that things have not improved specifically since the election of Barack Obama. Lori says race relations will never improve to the level we want them as long as we continue to separate the races. Having movies, shows, and television stations just for one race or another does not help unite the races. And Naisha says, has racism improved in the last 50 years? I would say yes, but not by much. Where we have not made much of an improvement is the fact that there are some people still holding prejudicial attitudes of one another and will stereotype a person because of the color of their skin. Gertrude says, stupid question. Paula Dean, Trayvon Martin, obviously a reference to some very high-profile cases that have made news in recent months. Charlotte says, yes, they have. I turned 70 today and remember well that bathrooms were marked for white or colored. In some parts of Maryland, they were not so kind and actually used the N-word instead. This is just one of the inequities African Americans were faced with daily. So we are continuing to monitor the discussion on social media, and remember the hashtag that we're using tonight, Your Voice, Your Future, and go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Fox Baltimore. Mark, back to you.
Jen. And so for those in the studio audience who didn't hear all of that, Jen actually laid out quite a few comments we've gotten from folks at home who are obviously very fired up about this particular issue, very passionate about the topic. And we have people passionate here as well. So let's go to this young lady. Please tell us who you are, where you're from, and ask your question.
My name is Voodoo Lady, and I'm from Mama Africa Arise. I'm the first African born in America, which I consider the love-hate problem that brought us here as slaves and then put us out as eviction chattel. First we were chattel slaves. Then now we're eviction chattel. So my question is, what is to be done with me? I am not an African American because I do not assimilate. I represent the soul of Mama Africa and all of the African women who are the founding mamas of this society, who created the infrastructure of this society by providing free labor, and now we're in a condemnation kind of situation wherein I'm trying to learn how to love in order to confront all of that hatred. For example, you talk about our drug boys, I think. Well, they're in my neighborhood, and we had on my corner, and we had a good 3-year fussing, cussing, praying, calling the police, hugging, kissing, everything that came, throwing water on each other, everything that we could think of.
And your question is?
And my question is, we need to go within our community, because I am redeeming our people. Use the police as the last resort after you tell them you're going to call the police. And what are you to do with me? As I said to Casey Clark, I don't feel like I belong in this society, because once I began to manifest soul, everybody on my side has continued to be punished, including me.
All right,
and
so make sure, let's get your question.
And I said, what do you do with me? I told Casey Clark, sometimes I feel like returning back to Mama Africa, because this society is fine if you're an African American, but don't you dare express your original pre-slavery heritage, not even as Voodoo Lady or anything else.
Let's go ahead and get a response to this. By the way, the moderator says you are part of this society.
Well, it hasn't been proven yet.
Let's go to the CD.
If I may, first of all, I have to say that I remember seeing her in the communities, tilling the land, working in the vineyard. So I appreciate people who contribute to the growth and development of our society, and we have to pay homage to that. There's several people who are in the listening audience who do that every single day. It's important for us to understand that when you have a verdict that took place in Sanford, Florida, when Trayvon Martin was murdered by George Zimmerman, when you have that type of verdict take place, people who are part of the fabric of society, they may have the tendency to be left out of the system of justice, the application of justice, especially if one of their children commits such a crime. The wheels of justice have the potential to move much swiftly. We see that happen every single day. When we look at the Voting Rights Act, what took place, the gutting of Section 4, which literally gutted the entire Voting Rights Act, people who that policy pertained to are wondering kind of sort of where they fit in to the fabric of this society, especially if rights and liberties are indivisible to everybody, or inalienable rights. So my contention is we have to fight to restore the integrity of this country, and the way that we do that is to get down in the trenches and to fight and to be involved in our communities. And the way to do that is to be involved on the ground level. I've been hearing a lot about politics today, and I've got to say that I think that one of the things that has happened is there's been a lot of partisan politics already infused into this discussion. And I realize there's some candidates on the panel today, but when you look at unemployment, in 1963, it was 10.9, and today it's 12.6. When you look at the fact that 25% of African American households are in extreme poverty, when you look at the fact that Head Start was cut by 57,000, the role of government certainly does play a role. So I take issue with the fact, specifically from people who are running for public office, who would contend that government doesn't have a role, because if government doesn't have a role, then what are you running for? And as so far as Democrats and Republicans are concerned, people of color, poor people, working class people, they could care less who's in office. What they're concerned about are public officials who are going to get in there, work, pull up their sleeves, and create opportunity on the ground for the working class people of this country. That's what people are concerned about. And so when we look at the issue of race, we also have to look at the issue of class, because that's the issue that binds us. You see, there's more that unites us than divides us, but we've got to be honest about it and confront the issues head on.